Let me tell you a tale of terror. Last night I watched Irish national television and I was scared. Scared for the future of our economy, our people, our children. I'm going to show you why. So here's a short clip of what I had to witness.
How bad if we don't have more restrictive measures? How bad do you think this is going to get?
The living with the virus strategy is the slow road to herd immunity, and the fast road is refrigerator trucks and mass graves. The best estimates we can make are in the region of 20 to 30,000 fatalities.
How is this going on our national television channel with no real challenge, based on Imperial College modelling? How did we get here? How is this happening? Why are they doing this? Well, let's look at the ABCs, so I'm going to bring you through it, the actual data. So A, let's look at Ireland's actual epidemic back in April timeframe, deaths per million people, many sad passings. But remember that 95% were too aged or moribund or comorbid to even be given ICU treatment. And that was an ethical decision. So 19 out of 20 of the people who passed, right, independent of SARS-CoV-2, were already in serious trouble and it wasn't appropriate to try and save them. So keep that in mind. If we put in the trend line here and we just take out that 95%, in fairness, for perspective, this is the shape of Ireland's SARS-CoV-2 epidemic. Less than one person per million people per day passing who are outside that group. And that was at the peak. It obviously flatlines after that. B, let's look at Ireland's actual mortality impact in 2020 in the first 5 months of the year. Okay, you can see 19 was a little softer, soft January, so you'd expect 2020 to be a little harsher. That's the way it works, especially with the epidemic SARS-CoV-2 virus. So let's look. Right, that's the CSO data sent to me by Graham Neary. The month of April is actually not much different than January in 17 and 18. And overall, we can see that there is no real signal overall, even though 19 was a soft year and 20 should have been harsher. Right. C, let's look at Ireland and Sweden now, and let's look at the projection that was made last night on national TV. We'll put in the trend lines for Ireland in purple, Sweden in brown. And if you correct for aged profiles and other factors, Ireland and Sweden essentially performed the same, even though Sweden had no lockdown and no masks. We'll now just compress that and leave room for the projection that was put out last night of 30,000 people dying without harsh measures. And let's change the scale because we're going to have to leave room for this preposterous projection. Change the scale by a factor of 10 and the lines come down here from the actual epidemic. And here's the projection. Look at it and weep. As I said. Sweden, by the way, this is a picture taken in the last few weeks, are essentially back to normal. No masks, even on buses. And during the epidemic, CNN on May the 6th went into Stockholm and videoed people getting their hair cut, even elderly people, bars, cafes, using the classic pandemic guidelines up to 2019 before the world decided to copy China. So as you can see, Sweden is doing great. Gold standard in epidemic management. Another piece of C, the World Health Organization yesterday quietly mounted Professor John Ioannidis' paper. He was correct on the infection fatality rate estimates back in April 2020, and he was scourged for coming out with them. But now the WHO has mounted his latest paper, and the estimates are overall infection fatality rate 0.23% median, corrected, and under 70s around 0.05% median. So this is order of magnitude or more lower than the projections that sent the world into hysteria. And this has been borne out by the data, as I showed you for Ireland. As I said. Why did we end up in this mess? Well, Imperial College. They based their projections way back in March on 6 people who were infected out of 680 odd in 6 flights that came out of Wuhan. And it's in their paper. And these huge projections were copied by the world. But as you can see here, the approximate projections for Sweden without harsh measures, what actually happened with no lockdown, no masks, was this. Exactly what we would have predicted back in late March, and what Ioannidis was right about. For those who still cling to lockdowns, sorry, the science is out. Many published papers now establishing that lockdown has a minimal effect in general. Okay, so this URL here, you can go to and find these papers, and this is not even exhaustive. There are more. So no excuse for lockdown having limited the impact. And Sweden also nicely proves that. And finally, the actual trends in Ireland over the past weeks. Here's the ICU, 1 in the last day, 2 out. The last week or so flattening off. Around 30 people out of 5 million people in Ireland in ICU at the moment. And they are with SARS-CoV-2 positive PCR, not necessarily all driven by COVID-19. And note in a real epidemic, which is the first wave, the big one, note how fast ICU rises. Right? That's an epidemic. Note how that's nearly vertical. Note how this is nearly horizontal. Also back here, 95% of the deceased never actually were afforded ICU. They were never in there. So this graph you can put up through the roof if they were included. Right now, I'm guessing the inclusion is a lot more generous, but we don't know that because we don't have the data. So my final word on the matter, given that Spain is way ahead of us and they've flattened out in mortality now, and France pretty much too, so we have those projections, that's my final word on the matter. Our national media is giving a platform to people making crazy projections that bear no relation to reality and pushing Ireland into further economic and social destruction, right? And debt and delayed cancer cases and depression and increased suicide levels. Complete undermining of our society, and as I've shown you, not in any way linked in any scientific fashion to the actual data in this matter. And just a reminder that I do need support to continue putting together all of this content, and at patreon.com/Ivor Cummings, or for PayPal at tinyurl.com/Ivor Cummings, where you can do a one-off or a monthly support. So I'd really appreciate that, guys, and keep me getting the science out there and countering perhaps the more biased corporate type science. Thank you.